In this Patreon-requested album review, I was asked to review The Way of All Flesh, the fourth full album from Gojira released in 2008. I love Gojira. There are only a few metal bands who stay consistently excellent in multiple ways, and as this is the last Patreon-requested album review I do in this specific video style, I love that I get to talk about a band that I haven't been able to cover yet. For those that might be unaware, Gojira is one of the best metal bands, and in my opinion of any genre, to ever come from France. While the love fest here in the States for Gojira didn't truly start until a few years ago, the band was still churning out lengthy, heavy-hitting progressive albums that would impress just about any metal fan. The best way to introduce The Way of All Flesh is what the album focuses on: life and death. In past interviews, Joe talks about how discussing death can be taboo for many people across the world. You don't go to a party and start talking about death. In The Way of All Flesh, life and death are the focus through well over an hour of metal. Let's be honest, while many people can make a joke about death and death metal, ha 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 ha, it's fair to say that back in 2008, and even in today's metal scene, the popular content in metal has been more about putting up a fight and a bro down, as opposed to actual thought-provoking ideology. The music is guttural and at times ferocious, and there is meaning behind it here. And when I say ferocious, I mean it. From the opening few minutes in Oroborus, you get the drum pound and deep heavy riffs blasting your eardrums and completely shocking your senses for what to expect in an album. It's not just a great way to kick off The Way of All Flesh, but it's a great track to rattle your brain to. One thing that can be said about the Duplantier brothers is that they know how to create a deep rhythm. The first 5 minutes of this album have a tone that will require you to blow out your subs when listening. Oroborus is so well mixed and refined that it's almost to the level of precise calculations that you can clearly hear every cymbal hit from Mario. That description of how well mixed and recorded Oroborus sounds is a trait that The Way of All Flesh in entirety possesses. This metal album sounds like it required many a long night in the studio to fine-tune every single decibel of sound. It's definitely not the old analog tape recording style of decades old, even if, oddly enough, the album is almost a decade old now. This album is relentless. The speed and rhythm changes within songs demonstrates the different layers Gojira intended in the progression about life and death, and at times you truly feel like your life is on the line with just how fiercely the music is coming at you. From beginning to end, it's a wild ride that you will not fall asleep to. Picking a single from an album like The Way of All Flesh must have been extremely difficult, but Vacuity was highlighted, and I think I understand why. The headbang riffs and Joe's growls in the verses will speak to just about any metalhead. The slight speed increase after 3 minutes isn't a big enough change to derail the feel of the track, and it sells the style of the album well. With over an hour of some low-octave sound, it can feel a bit overwhelming, especially in the second half of the album. Fortunately, there are some breaks with instrumental segments and even a full track like The Silver Chord. Gojira might be known for their live performances and growling in front of a frantic drum beats, but the band needs more recognition as composers. I love instrumental breaks like The Silver Chord that can change the pace of something while still engaging the listener. Afterward, you can be thrown back headfirst into the rhythm. It's after this point in the album that the theme and anger really starts to take off, including a great inclusion of Randy Blythe on vocals for the song Adoration for None. Admittedly, it is a lot to take in when you listen to this album from front to back. It'll shake your brain even on half volume if you aren't prepared for it, and at some point you'll forget what song you're actually listening to. But even with that feeling of being overwhelmed over so much sound coming at you, I'd be lying if I said I didn't really enjoy it. Gojira have an almost hypnotic way of making a listener fall in love with them, even in songs about life and death. I'm glad that I got to end this run of Patreon-requested album reviews on a band that I think is so technically sound that they should be pointed out more often in the metal world. I'm not going to say that The Way of All Flesh is my favorite Gojira album, but it's still brutal and a great demonstration of what these Frenchmen can create, even on a grim topic. Overall, The Way of All Flesh is a great roller coaster ride with more speed and downhill thrills than uphill gentle climbs. It's a rush with thunderous drum tracks, and you'll be hard-pressed to not scream along the way. You may need to take a break from it at some point to gather your thoughts, but it's still worth the ride altogether.